Do you have a plan for how you will cook in a power outage?
Today we're going to share 12 of our favorite ways to cook when the power goes out. Hey Provident Preppers, I'm Kylene.
And I'm Jonathan, and today we're doing this video as part of National Preparedness Month and also as part of the 30 Days of Preparedness collaboration being hosted this year by Rogue Preparedness. Let's all work to become a little bit more prepared.
In this video, we're going to talk about my 12 favorite ways to cook when the grid goes down. And you know, we did this challenge a couple years ago where for the month of November, we didn't use any natural gas or electricity to cook our food, and wow, was that an experience. In fact, you might want to check out that playlist because every week we posted a video and told you what we learned during that process.
So before we go any further, a note from the safety guy. As we do this, we need to make sure that we are doing it safely. Whatever method we choose, it must be safe, and we must have working carbon monoxide and fire detectors. So make sure that this is safe and have a great time with it.
And when it talks about the carbon monoxide detectors, we have this little portable one with a digital readout, because the ones that you have installed in your home, they will only alarm when it reaches a certain level. But if you have one of these little ones that have the digital display on them, you can know if there's any carbon monoxide at all and make a few different choices before it gets dangerous. Now that we've taken care of safety, we're going to talk just a little bit about fuel conservation, right? And some ways that you can conserve fuel, because the less fuel that you use, the less you have to store. So we'll start with that and then move into 12. Before we get into the cooking methods, I want to say a word about conservation. Fuel conservation is so important, because if we've always got a limited supply of fuel, right? Well, okay, except for with the sun oven, but even then, on a cloudy day, you're not going to have fuel. So we want to make sure that we stretch the fuel as far as we possibly can. And that's when thermal cooking or retained heat cooking come into play. And it's a very basic concept, right? You heat whatever it is that you want to cook up to boiling. You get it hot all the way through. It doesn't really work with roasts because you need the center of the roast to be hot, or else it will cool all of the other liquid. But it totally would work with a stew or soup or beans or anything like that. And so let's just listen to this method for just a second. So this is a thermal cooker. And what we do with this, it's just a really nice stainless steel cooker. I can use any fuel source that I need to heat this up. I can put it on my wood-burning stove. I can use a butane heater. I can even heat this up using little tea lights. And I want to bring it to a nice strong boil. And then I'm going to put it in this thermos, and what it does is this will help to retain the heat. Now, quite frankly, this will only last for about 6 hours. And so what I do is I throw a blanket over it or towels, because I want to increase that insulation. So you can totally do this even with just a box or a laundry basket. You just layer blankets or towels on the bottom. You want about 4 inches of insulation on each side. And then you put the hot, whatever it is, in the center, and then you pile more blankets on side and around, and you tuck them in. You can do this inside of an ice chest. Just click the card in the corner and I'll take you to a video that we created or a post that teaches you the basic concepts. But so what that does is it makes it so you only used 10 or 15 minutes of your fuel to heat something up. And then for the other 4 hours that it needs to cook, it's going to cook all by itself without any additional heat. One of the tricks is, though, it's going to take about 4 times as long for it to cook, right? So if it was going to take 30 minutes, you heat it up to a boil, it took you 15 minutes, you put it in there, it's going to take you about an hour or more to be able to have it done, which quite frankly, if I don't have to use any more fuel, I'm totally happy with that. But you're going to want to learn more about this. So make sure that you go and check out that post, because this is something that's really cool.
To kick this off, we're going to start with my very favorite, absolute favorite, the sun oven. The sun oven just cooks amazingly well, and in our climate, we can cook about 300 days a year, maybe even more. You don't have to have really high sun, but it's driven off of the UV index, so you do want to have some decent sun, but you can do some amazing cooking with this, and the energy stores free on the sun. There's no safety issues, no cost issues. Once you buy the sun oven, it just does a great job. So we just put in some rice and vegetables. The only real downside to the sun oven is you do have to have some other backup method, because you will have some days when it's just not going to work. When it's rainy, super cloudy, winter storm, whatever, you do have to have another backup method.
Our number 2 way to cook during a power outage is actually using a propane stove. Propane is a wonderful storage fuel. It will store forever. It's only limited by the container that it's in. You do have to be careful with it and store it away from your home, right? But it's a really good storage fuel, and you can use all kinds of different things. These usually stay on my back patio all summer and fall, and the reason why is because I do all of my canning on this so that I don't have the heat in the house, and it's right outside of my stove or my kitchen, so it makes it super easy to bring something out and cook here. And then this one has our barbecue, but it also has a burner right here on the side, and that's also a really good option, and that might be something that you already have. Now, one of the other things that we have that I think is really cool is an oven, a propane oven with a little stove on top of it that we have used before, and we'll use that in our garage when the weather is really bad, when it's snowy or windy. But we always open the garage door so that we can ventilate, because these are outside devices. You do not want to use them inside your home. They're not rated for indoor use, and it can be dangerous. But there are different options. These, if out here on this patio, it's shaded, so if I've got a little bit of rain, I'm fine. But if I have wind, it'll totally blow the wind or the flame out. So I do have to compensate for that. So also camping, there's all kinds of different camping styles. Just make sure that whatever you use, you're using it outside, unless your device is rated for indoor use. There are propane devices that are rated for indoor use, but be very, very careful. These are not, and these can't be used indoors.
The next thing we want to talk about is the Kettle, and this is one of our favorites because it's so compact, and yet it can do quite a bit of work for you. This is the fire pan right here, and then you have the ability to either cook on here with this, with a pan on top, or this kettle sits right on here and creates really a rocket stove. And this you can just continue to feed. There's a little hole here that you can continue to feed sticks in. You can boil water very quickly with this, which is often very important. Maybe you're making a meal with freeze-dried food, or you just need some hot water in a hurry. This takes very little fuel, and it heats that water very, very quickly. Great cooking tool.
Number 4 are rocket stoves. Now, I'm inside the house right now, but these are not to be used inside of the house. So, the Kelly Kettle is a good example of a rocket stove, the one that we just did, where you're putting the fuel in the bottom, and it has a chimney effect, which makes that fire burn hotter and cleaner, and so you're able to use less fuel to be able to heat your food. This is a little teeny tiny rocket stove here. So you're putting the pot, hold on. Okay, I'm back. So you're putting the pot on the top, right? And you're feeding the fuel in the bottom. And so it's really easy to use debris and little pine cones or sticks or twigs or things like that to fuel your fire. Now, there's a whole bunch of different kinds of this. There are some that are in an ammo can that come ready to use as a rocket stove. I have a friend who built one out of these blocks that you can see. And we did a contest. That video was kind of fun. It was a challenge. Somebody challenged us to use the least amount of fuel possible to cook a meal. And so what we had done is we took a rocket stove that you could also use charcoal briquettes, and in any of the rocket stoves, you usually can do that too. Well, not all of them, but some of them. And we used a pressure cooker and just made an entire meal out of twigs from our garden. So that would be kind of a cool video to watch. We've also got this giant Bear River rocket stove where it's got this huge griddle on the top and this amazing oven. And like we cooked our Thanksgiving dinner there for a whole bunch of people in that Bear River rocket stove. And it was really cool, but we actually purchased it with our neighborhood in mind. As long as we heat it up, right, then our neighbors can come bring their meals and put on it and heat up their meals when there's a problem. So that was one of our ways of kind of contributing to our community.
So number 5 is Dutch oven cooking. If you're already a fan, know that this is a wonderful emergency preparedness method for cooking. If you haven't explored this, maybe it's time that you did. I'm here with my granddaughters and we're just waiting for this cobbler to come out of the Dutch oven. You can use a Dutch oven for all kinds of things, breads, main dishes, desserts, all kinds of things. It does a great job and it's very effective. These charcoals, we get them started in the charcoal chimney here. These particular charcoals we put in a bucket 17 years ago and they are still like the day they were new. So they store very safely and very easily. Great fuel, great method.
And number 6 for outdoor cooking is actually just over an open fire. Now this is a portable fire pit. It was an inexpensive one, and so it's a little bit on the rickety side. Yeah, there. And so theoretically, you should be able to take it all kinds of different places. This is kind of cool because if you're having a regular fire in it, it keeps the embers from going away. But it's got these racks, right? And so you could, well, you could do charcoal in it, but you could cook over an open fire just on something like this. Now, if you build something that's really cool in your backyard and have it all set up so that you can cook on it all the time, that would be so much fun. But just an open fire, even if that means that you just make a little fire pit, right, and have a fire in it, make sure that it's safe, that it's not going to get out of control. It's kind of stinky and it's hard to regulate the temperature sometimes, but it's absolutely a viable option. Now, all of the other methods that we have talked about are outdoor cooking, right? There's a huge difference between indoor cooking and outdoor cooking, and that difference could mean life and death to you. So just because somebody says you can cook with something indoors doesn't mean you can. You've got to be safe. We highly recommend you always have one of these carbon monoxide detectors. This one has a digital readout, so if there's any carbon monoxide being produced, it will start to read out. So sometimes we'll use it in our garage and you can tell when the car starts in the garage, the reading will go up, and then it'll go down when it's all out of there. So just be super careful. I just always have it out. Battery operated, it's better safe than sorry. So, and it's never ever gone out with this safe heat. This is safe heat. So it is just in this little can. It comes in flats of 12. And I usually buy mine at Sam's Club. You can buy it online or at restaurant places, but usually I found that the cheapest place is Sam's Club. This is not quite the same as Sterno. Sterno does make it, but there are differences. This one is rated for indoor use, and most Sterno is not, so be really careful. But do you see this flame on here? You can barely see it because it burns so cleanly. This is a folding camp stove. And with these, I do recommend you get the Sterno brand because there are off brands, but the Sterno brand is much sturdier, right? And you just put it in there and it'll cook your food. Now, it is not gonna cook as hot as propane or butane or some of those other fuels. It's going to be a slower process. And so, click the card in the corner and it'll take you to a post that we did. We've got some videos on this that really go into more detail. But the thing that I really like about this is that, like this can right here, it's been in my storage for over 12 years. Right? And it's in a little flat. It's safe for me to store limited quantities inside my house. The same as being able to store like alcohol, right? And yet it's so quick and so easy. Now, when I'm done, all I do with this is I take this lid and I smother the flame. then you allow it to cool completely. If it does not cool completely and you screw that on tight, it creates a vacuum and like you won't be able to get it off again. Well, John can get it off, I can't. So I let it cool completely and then I put the lid on and you can use it again. So in that one flat of 12 cans at 6 each, I've got 72 hours of burn time. That's a lot of inside cooking fuel in a very small space. Number 7 is actually just a little alcohol burner. Now, they come in different shapes and sizes, and they are designed to burn alcohol. It's actually not the alcohol that burns, it's the fumes. And so if you look here, you dump the alcohol in the center, and all around these edges, you'll see these little holes. And when you light it, the fumes burn, right? And just like with a safe heat, when you're done, you can extinguish it with the lid and put it away. But it will fit in these little sterno containers, right? And here's a smaller version. I bought these just on Amazon, right? This one was a military surplus. Wow, it's nice and sturdy. I wasn't able to find any of those anywhere for sale, but I did find some of these. The reason why, in a way, this is better than safe heat, okay, they have their pros and cons. So safe heat, it's like all in that can. I never have to touch it. I just pull it out. The fuel's there. It's so clean. It's so safe. But with this, I do need to store the fuel and then I need to dump it in, right? But you can actually make your own alcohol, right? And so in a long-term event, something like this, my safe heat's gonna run out, but I can find ways to make alcohol or to get alcohol. It needs to be a really high proof. The higher the proof, the cleaner it will burn because, okay, let's face it, water doesn't burn well. But this is kind of a really good option for indoor cooking because alcohol burns very cleanly. Well, clean alcohol burns very cleanly. Number 9 are tea lights. Believe it or not, this little tiny candle can cook your food. Like, it's seriously amazing. Now it's slow. It's gonna take a long time. If you're using a butane stove, you're gonna get that water boiled in a matter of a few minutes. With this, it might not actually ever boil, like a rolling boil, but it'll heat up, but it's gonna take it a little while, right? The more of these you use at once, the faster it will cook. But these are safe to store, like incredibly safe to store. This bucket is actually a bucket. It has 600 tea lights in it, and it has 2 butane lighters because I wanted it to be complete, right? Make sure that I have the means to light them. But we went out and we bought these at the end of the season, the holiday season, when they were closing all their tea lights out. Like Walmart had them for $1 for a big package. That's the time to stock up. But I would encourage you to stock up on the ones unscented, because using any scented ones, it's just too strong when you're trying to cook. And if that's your only fuel, that's all you've got. So I would much prefer unscented. Life lessons learned. Now, one of our viewers, she's so cool. So she sent me pictures of how she used a pot to create an oven using tea lights, and she was able to bake bread with it. Another viewer told me about how it was either her mother or her grandmother would put a baking sheet in the bottom of the oven, light some tea lights on it, put another baking sheet right on top the next rack, right? So that they're fairly close together, and she could cook bacon on it in the oven. Now you have to leave the door open, right? Because these have to have oxygen to burn. And any flame that doesn't have enough oxygen can create carbon monoxide. Normally these aren't going to produce carbon monoxide, but they need to have enough oxygen. So make sure you leave the oven door open a little bit, but that is fantastic. We've done all kinds of things like chocolate fondue with these. Just know that it's going to take a little bit longer, and it does provide a little bit of warmth. You can do little heaters. We did a whole post on these, so click the card in the corner and learn everything you ever wanted to know about tea lights and more. Number 10 of our grid down cooking are butane stoves. Now this is really interesting because there's a lot of reasons why I'm not a fan of it, and let me tell you why. First, it has these little cartridges, right? which make it super convenient to use, but they're like little bombs. And so storage is an issue, right? Butane will store forever, but the canisters will degrade, and if they leak, there's problems, and it's just hard to find a really good place to store them. However, oh, and the other thing is, some of them are rated for indoor use and some aren't. This one is actually one that we had purchased at Sam's Club, and I went to get another one the other day, and they don't have them right now, so I don't know if they'll get them back or not. But this is rated for indoor use in a well-ventilated area. It's meant to be used by caterers or at expos, things like that, where you're in large spaces to heat food. And so this, I'd still make sure you're in a well-ventilated area, but it's designed to be used inside. A lot of them are designed to be used when you're camping, when you're out in the open. So make sure if you're using a butane stove, you know which it is. Part of the problem with these guys is that when you insert this canister, that's the time it'll leak. And butane is a lot like propane, where it's heavier than air and it will just settle, right? And wait for an ignition source until it explodes. Okay, now having that said, and saying theoretically this isn't my best option, when we did our 30 days grid down cooking and I couldn't use any electricity or natural gas for 30 days, that was so hard, but it taught me a lot. And one of the things is that all of these alternative methods take so long, right? It just takes a really long time, except this. I don't have to manage this fire. It's hot, it's fast. When I want to cook something, I just put it on and it heats it up really quickly. And in that respect, I'm a huge fan of the butane stoves. You cannot store enough fuel safely to last for a longer term event. Absolutely, if you're talking about 3-4 day power outage, maybe a week, you could store enough fuel relatively safely, but there's no way you could store it for a year. And that's one of the reasons why you need to have other forms, because some of the fuels are much safer to store. For instance, charcoal or firewood, those are super safe to store and they'll store for a really long time. But I think it's good to have a mixture in our storage, right? And to have different options, because this absolutely was my favorite during that power outage, or during that self-imposed power outage. Number 11 is a wood burning cook stove. A wood burning stove is great because it heats your home as well as can cook your food, which means it's only good in the winter time, right? It has to be cold or it'll just make it absolutely miserable. But what a great way to be able to heat your home and cook food. I have done everything on this. This one actually has an oven, so we can cook in it. You put the wood over here and it has a water jacket, so that I can pour water in it and have hot water all the time. This is just a little warming oven on the top to keep food warm. But this is a great option. It's kind of an expensive option. And you have to be able to live in an area where this is legal and this is okay. But think about a wood burning cook stove. It might be really good, especially for a long-term event. Number 12 is a masonry heater. This is our TempCast masonry heater, and we just installed it last year. We are super excited. It is actually in a building that we have that is meant to be a family gathering place, because our house is small and we don't have enough room for all 11 kids to come and have dinner together anymore. So we built a little outbuilding in our yard, and we installed this, and it's super, super cool. So this is made by TempCast. I will leave a link so that you can see more details about it, but it's really cool because you make a fire in here once or twice a day, and it will heat. It heats up all the masonry, and it continues to heat the room even when there's no fire going. And we designed this so that the heat goes up here, down, and it goes out these benches. And so it warms the benches, right? Using just all of that exhaust heat. So it's pretty cool. But back to cooking. The reason why the TempCast masonry heater is so cool for me for cooking is because you see this really cool oven here? This, you make the fire, and as soon as it starts to die out, then this is about the temperature of a pizza oven. And then it cools down a little bit, and it's 350 to 400 degrees that you would bake bread or all kinds of different things. And then as it cools a little bit more, it becomes the temperature of a slow cooker. So you could put food in there that you would normally be using in a crock pot. You can just put it in there and let it slow cook. And so I am super grateful. This is an amazing tool, but it's not for everybody because everybody doesn't have the space or the financial resources to create something like this. And Timcast, they have a do-it-yourself kit. Like you can buy just the center of it, the core, and do it yourself and save a lot of money. But for those of you who do have the resources to be able to do something like this is a great long-term solution. Now, I'm not showing you cooking something in it right now because it's September and it's still way too warm where we live to have a fire. And so, you know, this is great for the winter, not so great for the summertime. In fact, not good at all for the summertime. So when we're selecting the way that you cook, right, what your options are, there's no one perfect option. You need indoor, you need outdoor, and you need things like this that work great in the wintertime, but not so good in the summertime. 12 different ways to cook your food might seem like a lot, but we have in no way touched on all of the different ways that you can cook your food. So don't think that it's an exclusive list. There are so many different ways, and you've just got to choose the ones that are best for you. We encourage you to have a way to cook indoors and a way to cook outdoors. And then the rest of it's up to you.
And make sure that you're looking out for safety.
Yes, yes.
And now for the question of the day. How are you going to cook your food when the power's down? Comment below. And thanks for being part of the solution.